So whenever you're
5
ready.
seconds. Okay, so 5, 4. Hello, we are here for our virtual APA 2021 presentation. We want to thank Division 34 for this opportunity. I am here with my co-presenter, Dr. Timothy Snyder. My name is Amanda Cleveland. I am an associate professor of psychology at Lander University, and Dr. Snyder is a professor of psychology here at Lander University. The other part of our panel is going to be Dr. Bloom is going to be presenting, but we will lead off with our presentation on the impact of masculinity and participation in outdoor activities on environmentally friendly behavior.
Okay, in terms of the introduction, this study expands on the work that was done by Bro et al. In 2016. In a series of studies, they were looking at the relationship between eco-friendly, or what we call greenness, or green stereotypes, and femininity. And in those studies, again, just to kind of recap what they found, people in general tend to conceptually or intellectually link eco-friendly behaviors with femininity and feminine behaviors. And people who engage in green behaviors or eco-friendly behaviors are perceived as being more feminine, and even perceive themselves as being more feminine. So regardless, male or female, if they perceive themselves engaging in green behaviors, they'll perceive themselves as being more feminine. And also, finally, men's willingness to engage in green behaviors can be influenced by the maintenance of their gender identity. And men may very well try to maintain a more macho image. So if you threaten their gender identity, they may be less likely to engage in green behaviors. So our study expanded upon that. We were both of us thinking about what are some possible or potential moderating effects. And we thought in terms of participating in outdoor activities. Maybe people who engage in more outdoor activities might be more likely to engage in eco-friendly behaviors. And myself, for example, I fish, I hunt, I boat, camp, I like being out in the woods. We got to talking about it and thought, well, maybe men who engage in a lot of outdoor activities like fishing and hunting are more likely to be more green in their perceptions of the environment and actually also their behaviors in daily life. So we constructed a survey and we put it on Amazon Mechanical Turk. This took place in April of 2019. We had a total of 303 participants, all males. All were over the age of 18. The average age was 38.6 with a standard deviation of 12.5. As you can see there, vast majority were white, 75%, with 7% black, 4% Hispanic, Latino, and 14% Asian Pacific Islander. They also commented or reported on where they lived in terms of what community. 37% lived in urban areas, 47% suburban, and 18% rural. As you can see there, most of the states were represented in the sample, 45 states, with New York, Florida, California, and Texas making up a larger percentage of the sample. So along with simple demographics, we also assessed a lot of different types of behaviors and attitudes. First off, data concerning purchase and use of eco-friendly products. For example, do you have solar panels on your home? Do you have a hybrid car? Do you purchase green-friendly cleaning products? Things like that. Actually, we also collected data concerning the frequency of eco-friendly behaviors. Again, how frequently do you recycle? We also looked at membership. Are you a member in an environmentally oriented organization like the Sierra Club, the Audubon Society, Ducks Unlimited, National Wild Turkey Federation. Okay. We also asked them about frequency of outdoor activities. How many times a year do you go fishing, hunting, canoeing, hiking, things like that? And finally, we asked them about the importance of environmental policies. Again, how important is the protection of endangered species? Laws protecting, pollution and the water quality and things like that.
We also included the masculine behavior scale, which is a 20-item scale that has 4 subscales. These subscales are success dedication, restrictive emotionality, inhibited affection, and exaggerated self-reliance. An example of one of these items is something like, I don't usually discuss my feelings and emotions with others. So our hypothesis, sort of to reiterate, was that we thought that how frequently people engaged in these environmentally friendly in these outdoor activities, this would be predictive of environmentally friendly behaviors. We also thought it would be predictive of support for environmentally friendly policy. So we found the first thing to be true. So if you engaged in a greater frequency of outdoor activities, that was found to be predictive of engaging in more environmentally friendly behaviors. However, it was not found to be predictive of attitudes of environmental protection. Masculinity was also not found to be related to environmentally friendly behavior or attitudes toward environmental protection. This was not consistent with previous research, the masculinity piece. So our findings on that do not match up with the research that sort of inspired this. So part of our hypothesis was supported in that the outdoor activity does seem to have an effect, so that does seem to matter, but only on the behaviors and not on the attitudes toward environmental protection. So there was a bit of a trend toward an interaction where the direction of the effective masculinity was dependent on the amount of outdoor activity, but again, that didn't reach significance either. So it's still a bit difficult to explain why perhaps we didn't see the effective masculinity that is similar to what had happened in previous research. But we have some thoughts on that in a minute. So another thing that we looked at based on previous research is that we found research that suggested that millennials are more likely to purchase green products. This was a part of our variable on environmentally friendly behavior. It wasn't the entire variable, but there were a couple of the items that made up that variable that were green product related. 64.4% of our sample would be considered millennials. As a reminder, these are folks born between 1980 and 2000. So millennials are 40 now. Which seems a little hard to believe, but that has happened. So we didn't find a significant relationship here or even a trend toward one for age and environmentally friendly behavior. So we really saw nothing happening with regard to this. So to talk more about how we didn't find an effect for masculinity, we didn't ask about political orientation. We discussed this when we were creating this study. Of course, we are aware of the politicization of things like global warming. We were actually pretty careful not to use terms like global warming. So our questions on behavior were very direct. They were, do you recycle? Do you own a hybrid vehicle? Those kind of things. And the ones on environmental protection were, do you support protection of endangered species, right? So we were really sort of trying to steer clear from some of those really politicized terms. And that was kind of our thinking for not including a question that sort of could have primed people toward political ideology, which can, as we know, be divisive. However, in hindsight, it would seem that we really, really should have included this anyway, as it was still going to have an effect, and now we can't add it into the regression. So we should have asked this. So this research by McWright and Dunlap, basically they looked at 10 years of Gallup studies from 2001 to 2010. And they found that white conservative men, specifically more than any other group of Americans, supported climate denialist views. And these were views like the effects of global warming will never happen, and recent temperature increases are not primarily due to human activities. So these are sort of two different ways of denying global warming, right? The first one just says it's not a thing, and the second one says it is, but people aren't doing it. So the authors of this, their hypotheses, or sort of their theories to support this, were things like identity protective cognition thesis, which is basically a way of sort of explaining that white conservative males have a higher level of environmental risk acceptance. If you've ever read Strangers in Their Own Land, there's a similar sort of theme in that book. They also talked about system justification tendencies, which is just kind of a complicated way of saying that white conservative men have a tendency to defend the status quo. And so these were sort of the two different pieces that they used to explain why white conservative men on something like global warming will never happen. 29.6% of them endorsed that belief, whereas only 7.4% of other adults endorsed that belief. So in these 10 years of Gallup polling. So it stands to reason that individuals who espouse these types of beliefs would be less likely to support environmental protection measures or engage in environmentally friendly behavior. If you don't think global warming is real, you're not going to probably engage in behavior to help the environment or protect it, right? So future efforts here, we do think, should include these political questions, and probably really should just go ahead and ask some of these explicit questions on what people think about global warming, whether they think it's real, or if they do, what do they think is causing it? Because it is likely that is having some sort of moderating effect here. We also think that people should consider, continue to consider the effects of outdoor activities. So that was not a question that had previously been asked. So we do recommend that that continue to sort of be included as a variable in future research. So these are references, and I will include one sort of note in the references. The first one here is the Scientific American article. It's written by two of the folks that wrote the Is Eco-Friendly Unmanly article that sort of gave us this idea. If you're somebody who doesn't have easy access to peer-reviewed articles without paying, you can search that Scientific American article, and it's a very good summary because it's written by two of the original authors. Now I'm going to turn it over to our other presenter on the panel.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your paper. It was really exciting to hear the wizardry of APA in the background by putting us together. I think you have more answers, and I have some answers and some questions, but in some ways we support one another, I think, which is lovely. So my name is Carla Bloom. I'm an associate professor of psychology at the College of Coastal Georgia. And I do have a co-author who got caught up in a job on the water kayaking. So he's been a great student co-author. He's very outdoorsy, but he does have an intro, and I'm going to share my screen here. So forgive me for popping in and out, but I think that this is the way that I can best give you the opportunity to meet Sam.
Hi, my name's Sam Guiteau. I'm a senior psychology major at the College of Coastal Georgia. I'm going to be graduating this December, so I'm quite excited for that. My interest in surfing came probably around 2017 when I started watching this professional surfer, John Florence, put out some videos on his competition surfing and traveling with his friends and family around the world. And since then, I have been transfixed by the sport of surfing because, well, John makes it look so easy. And so I've tried it several times, and surfing brings me to the ocean. It's where I sit meditatively, just look out on the horizon, patiently waiting for waves to come in. So it's like this.
All right, and then I will return to Sam. Did some work on the topic of awe for us, which is an important part of our study. So forgive me for reading. I hope there'll be an opportunity for APA for me to give the printed paper out with the, so you can see references, etc. But I think that this writing out of the paper for me was a really good way for me to express what we did. So here we go. The title of the paper is Surfing, Surf and Turf, the comparison of surfing and hiking across 5 psychological dimensions. So at first, surfing and hiking appeared to be, and actually turn out to be, very different psychological experiences. However, both include elements of risk, physical demands, and extensive exposure to the natural world. Previous research on the positive mental health benefits of both surfing and hiking have been reported. In this study, with the aim of being more comprehensive, we compared the experiences one against the other. And the 5 dimensions are, that we looked at: natural resources, use of natural resources, states of awe, mental health, mentions of the natural world, and comments related to preservation and conservation. The way that we organized the paper was to use blogs. So it was a little bit challenging to find blogs on surfing because surfers, as you might imagine, are very visual and they do vlogging more than blogging. So while there were blogs, it was more challenging than I initially anticipated. Let me define our terms for you so that we can get an idea of how we defined, for example, mental health. So for the purposes of this study, we chose a rather not loose definition, but not one that's strictly clinical either, but in the kind of spirit of Osgood's work from 1957, where emotional dimensions of pleasant to unpleasant and calm to excited and dominance of control became kind of the working framework for us. Our premise was that if we could locate these words in the blogs, doing content analysis, we would have words such as feeling in or out of control, or finding a situation pleasant or unpleasant, and that we also, of course, could begin to quantify if surfer or hikers had different experiences of being calm and pleasant, states of well-being versus out of control, feeling unpleasant, so on and so forth. Clearly, this way to define mental health is not ideal if one wants to have the kind of a purist clinical definition from the literature. But since we are using a content analysis, it's a way that we could account words and have a framework. It kind of enables a type of quantification. Let me define use of resources for you. Our purposes, for our purposes, use of resources defined as any mention of resources simply from using firewood found on a hike, to using seawater to clean off a board, to the finding of food, of foraging, hunting, fishing. We also wanted to use these ideas of bounty or lack of bounty, if there's depletion of resources or a bounty of resources. And we also wanted to look at the idea being that those earlier or later to a location might experience, say, less bounty. And there were examples of this, of course, that I'll talk about in a minute. Our definition of mentions of natural world, this is just purely mentions of natural world. So we just wanted to look at anything that was a tree, a rock, a brook, a clamshell, a wave, and to count to that. So yeah, this is that category surprised me more than any other for some reason. Comments related to preservation and conservation. So here we counted any mentions of preservation and conservation related to trash collection, concern over climate change, donations of financial donations to be given to support conservation efforts. Any mention in the blogs about encouraging others to donate or participate in efforts towards beach, sea, water, tree preservation, and so forth. Let me now let Sam talk a little bit. He did say a lot, but we're going to give him his minutes and let him define awe, because ultimately awe was the most, well, I'll let him talk about it. Screen sharing, I'm sorry for the clunk, but it will work. Sorry. He's right here.
It's mindful.
He did have a good time getting a lot of information, and I'm grateful to see him.
We found some articles.
Sorry. All right. Pretty sure that's him scrolling and not me, hopefully.
Our ideas was that there's going to be experiences of all involved in hiking and surfing. And so for that, we peered into the literature and we found some articles by Michalak and Kelter and Haidt. So Kelter and Haidt defined awe as this overlooked, under-researched emotional state that can be thought of as a combination of several factors. There's two factors that make awe exist and that we should talk about, which is this perceived vastness and need for accommodation. So let's break that down. So this perceived vastness is like, for example, looking up at the stars at night and just feeling this this sense that you're just a small speck of dust in the universe. Okay, so it's just like, wow, like it's crazy, right? And so your sense of self becomes, as what Michalak refers to in her article, is that your sense of self basically dissolves and it expands. Okay, and then in terms of accommodation, this is of course the Piagetian idea, where you have an experience that's outside your current schema, your current framework of reality. So, for example, if you're sitting under the stars, you see that you just have this realization that you're this speck of dust in the universe. Then you're gonna have to accommodate that into your working model of reality, and so perhaps you become humble in the face of it. Maybe that you look at your own pain or suffering that you experience and you realize it's totally small.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here with Sam, and I'm going to transition to our data collection and some of our results by doing when I proposed to APA, I did want to give some little pieces of Sam's filmmaking. He's actually a really wonderful filmmaker, and I'm just going to, since we're right here, just screen share some of his hiking video to set us in the mood for looking at hiking data. His friend does the music for him. Pretty cool. I think I'll stop that one there and start to give you an idea of what some of the data looked at. So choosing the blogs was also a challenge for us. There are some criteria that people that kind of rank blogs use, and they're like criteria such as Alexa rank, social media following, domain rating, and something called, I'm not quite sure what it is, I'm so sorry, it's a similar web rank. But these are kind of new to me as an academic to start looking at that type of ranking system. But I was able to pull off 5 blogs off of that ranking system. So just to give you a little idea of where they came from, and I will. And then there was also decisions being made just in terms of methodology about how do you choose one over another if there's a list of 27 or so. So we decided that they would be from the United States, that they would not be niche, such as, just trying out new gears or poles or packs, or, that they could not just be about, like a list, going over lists of things, that they actually had to be journal-like blogging done, and that the criteria we set were at least for 2 to 4 days. So we could follow 2 to 4 days across the blogs and able to get kind of a similar place that we might be able to look at some of the writing in there. Now, is it problematic? Yes, of course, because we have people in the desert, I have people on the mountain, but ultimately they really did speak within the categories that we were looking at. We did not do, as of yet, inter-rater reliability. We understand that's necessary, but as a sort of a beginner go and trying to weave through all these difficulties, this is what we found with the hiking. in the hiking blogs, we have 48, the highest, kind of a line by line content analysis. We have 48 instances of mentions of the natural world, from wildflowers to loons to golden eagles to rocky gorges to snow, lakes, rain, wind, prairie frost, and marmots. Apparently there's a lot of marmots in some areas where people are hiking. More so than any of our other categories, the natural world filled the blogs, marking their experience more than any other of the terms. They really were, might seem logical, but we can tell you that they're processing the experience through traversing through the natural world. So the next most common category, and this kind of surprised me, were terms related to mental health. So there were 30 comments that could be coded as statements about mental health, feeling happy or sad or frustrated. So some example, or being lost was mentioned by more than one person. So this person says, to an example, I was really a hot mess trying to figure out which way to go. Other comments related to unhappy or happy feelings, about the physical exertion, such as I was wasted by the end of the day, but happy to have completed this incredible loop. And another person said, I'd honestly rather go trudge through the mud than slip and fall on my ASS on these damn boardwalks. So, the physical world challenging them in ways that was bringing out a lot of more than cognitive, I thought, emotional expression, as we could see here. Getting lost, we talked about that. Of course, there were high emotions such as I'm reminded of the astonishing kindness of strangers in the middle of nowhere. And also social aspects of being on the trail. 3 good friends doing something we all enjoy. Finally, there were negative encounters with animals, particular bears. This person says they ended up seeing a bear, again, a little too close to their campsite. Another person talks about some injuries that they experienced, such as, I had stupidly gotten a sunburn on my thighs. And one person said, one of my friends tripped on a root and fell, hitting a sharp rock that made a deep cut in her arm, which they miraculously patched and went on to the rest of the loop that they were doing. Comments about conservation. I guess the sort of, you guys understand, you want to hear a lot of conservation, you're out there, you want to hear like, oh, please, let's save it all. But it didn't work quite as clearly as that, as people, darn, But anyhow, what did happen was this. There was not many mentions, only 3 comments out of like 98 comments that we counted. Only 3 were related. They seemed appropriate for the conservation category. There were very few comments pertaining to wanting to preserve. However, they did say things such as, this is a quote, wildfire plays an important role in maintaining healthy forest ecosystems. And another person in another burned out area said, then I realized this walk was the 4th day walking through burned forest and devastation. I just keep visualizing what once was, very sad. And finally, a blogger wrote, we started to see evidence of geologic disturbance. It looked like an earthquake had ripped up the earth and rocks and leaving huge gaps in the ground, which is something, sorry, it's asked me to update because why not do it right now? I texted everybody and said, don't, and whatever. So I thought it was interesting, and I know this is sort of results-y, but that they were talking about things. It's always fun when people mention things you don't anticipate, like, oh yeah, like the earth is hurting itself sometimes, whether it might be through a burn with lightning or whatever. So now natural resources, the hikers were using, there were 9 mentions of that. They were using their own natural resources. There were 2 mentions of trees wanting to be protected by trees at a campsite. However, gear was mentioned a lot. Trail magic, if you're familiar with the language of the Appalachian Trail, where someone goes out and leaves some snacks, and so those were resources, and 1 mention of that. Just the way the blogs are chosen, I guess. Let's see. And 3 of the 5 bloggers were bemoaning the lack of campsites. They say, quote, I made a prediction to my dad that the shelter area would be deserted, but boy, I was wrong. 2 large groups of summer camps with 10 kids plus had the same idea as us. So that jostling of resources to me is always interesting because I think it's related somewhat to power, who gets first. Kids maybe walk faster, I don't know. And finally, states of awe. So only 4 mentions of awe. I'll talk a bit more about this at the end. 4. Sam, I'm sorry, but only 4 mentions of awe. And I had to really take some liberty with deciding it was awe, to be honest, because I just wanted that moment where someone looked at the Milky Way, and was in awe of it. But instead, that you have to use comments like this, kind of box them in. The scenery all along this section was stunning. And another quote, the Seven Lakes Basin looks like a fairyland after all that rock. So there's either no awe or we're going to use that. And so we decided to put that in there, and we can argue if we want to, if whoever wants to email me to say. But I did find it hard to believe that someone was looking at the Milky Way and the Perseid shower and didn't express awe. Again, personality differences, temperament differences, blogging on your phone, having limited resources. We don't know why that is, but we have high amounts of natural world and low. So moving on to the surfing data, the natural world, I only got 3 blogs. So I'm still working on this. I'll see if I can find more blogs. They're not bloggers in the way that are the most useful to me. So, however, having said that, we have 3. And the bloggers don't really talk about the natural world, which you think that they would be loaded with natural world comments. But there was less natural world, and that there were many comments related to mental health. So 9 comments related to mental health. Things like, if you keep focusing, quote, if you keep focusing on the idea of becoming as good as the other people out there who have been surfing since they can walk, you will keep feeling disappointed. So this idea of anxiety, disappointment, one person talked about being kind of on a stage or a set where people were going to watch you or call you a buoy because you never move from the way back and come up front. So I'll wrap back around that stuff about mental health because I think it relates to the clinical literature kind of well about surf therapy. There were 0 counts of awe, unfortunately. And use of resources, there were only 3 comments, and they're all about surfboards, about their surfboards, hang on to your surfboard, chain your surfboard, you don't want to hurt anybody. A quote here is, your surfboard is a big floatable device and will undoubtedly keep you at the surface instead of letting the waves push you 25 meters under sea level to visit the deep sea creatures. You can tell our surfers are in a different place. It's really interesting, the raw and dangerous nature of being on the ocean. All right, so what can we do with this kind of data? So what we've done is kind of start to talk about an anti-conclusion versus conclusions, I think, or the lack of some states, particularly of awe, which I found really interesting. So why do we experience awe at all? And Kelter and Haight hypothesized that from an evolutionary perspective, awe may reflect the fundamental emotional response that low-rank group members have in the presence of a powerful group leader, which is kind of an interesting psychological perspective of power. Such a differential submissive response has clear advantages in terms of ensuring one's place in a group and maintaining social hierarchies that can boost long-term chances of survival. So if this is so, then those maybe those who experience awe states are more likely to exhibit signs of feeling less powerful, right? And encounter something of power. However, it might be that our bloggers were in fact not, by virtue of being bloggers, right, and having some experience, might not have mentioned awe since they were experienced, and maybe they'd hiked that area before, but maybe they had not lost awe, but weren't still commenting on awe all the time. So if it's about power, which is just a problem that you encounter when you're trying to use blogs, I think. All right. We also wanted to mention the numerous mentions of the natural world potential connections to the research for children exposed to outside. As you were mentioning in your paper, if you're exposed to outdoors, there are some benefits later in life, and there has been research that's connected children in particular having more of a ecologically minded adulthood, or more respect for the natural world. So one can imagine that the constant framing of their experiences while hiking being about flowers, birds, deer, clouds, rain could in fact create great connection to the natural world and reflect a close connection to it as they pass through. So almost like the constant recording bombardment of just through those hiking experiences could be very powerful, hopefully, in terms of conservation efforts. And this is just something we're thinking about. But that actually you spoke about, which is awesome. Finally, the overall comparison to surfing is a bit of an apples to oranges, more than I expected it to be. I just thought they would talk about all those waves and the sand and seashells and the seagulls. They don't. As the sports differed more than we anticipated, right? Surfing blogs are more general, such as what beaches provided for surfing, use more vlogs, but from the findings we have here, you can say that the surfers' experience was more mental, that is, more about feeling worthwhile or not, skilled or not, brave enough to surf in front of others, and the like. They had a highly developed vocabulary about the waves themselves, calling them glassy and other terms specific to surfing. It was not surprising, therefore, to see the power of surf therapy, right, and other forms of surfing involvement to increase mental health, that the experience itself would be beneficial to learning how to perform with lower anxiety in front of others, or would be a skill set to grow in confidence, or to learn to work with uncontrollable forces. And very lastly, future research needs, we need more analysis. We need to understand how to match these blogs a little better. And break down a category such as natural world, because there were some interesting things within natural world, because we had so much for the hikers, into animals, rocks, trees, etc. Really understanding the natural world experience. You might also try and add categories for surfing in particular, to kind of bring out more of the expression and to match the experience of what they're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed his video. That is well done.
Yeah. Very good.
It is really well done. He has a surfing one, but I don't want to push us to the edge of the earth by extending our time. But he's a talented filmmaker. Yeah, appreciate that. I'll pass that on to him. Thank you for doing this with me and supporting APA Division 34. And I really loved your paper. I was thinking all the time about, in lieu of discussion, I'll just say, really interesting data that you have about who actually is carrying on, doing more environmentally friendly activities.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's exciting.
And thank you to anyone who is watching this video.
Yes.
Please, cbluhm@ccga.edu for me. And you guys have your stuff on the PowerPoint, correct?
Yeah, and I'm mcleveland@lander.edu.
And I would be tsnyder@lander.edu.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And I am going to stop the recording.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Good night. Goodbye.
We would have to have that.
I know.